very decent. And you see those guys, most of them were college grads, but they went through what they call a 90-day training. 90-day wonder is what we call it. And for them to come out of that school and realize how to treat men and how to lead them was great. The same thing on that LSM. Our commanding officer, our captain, happened to be in the Iron Guard before, and I understand I heard later that a ship was torpedoed out under him in the Atlantic. But he came on there, and he had 60 men to lead. He had to train them.
Wow.
And we picked up reserve. Well, when the ship went out from Norfolk the first time, that was most of those guys for seating.
I see.
And I picked it up at Key West, Florida. And I was the only one in the signal communications, signal, radio, whatever, that had AC duty before these guys went from Norfolk to Key West. They trained, yes.
Yeah.
But none of us, there's only about 5 of us on the ship that ever seen any battle. So how are you going to realize how those guys are going to perform or act in the battle? You just don't know.
Yeah.
And I know I was scared to death a number of times the shells coming right over me and right at me, But guys just picked up and did things like that.
Sure.
But our officers the officers I was under were great. Great.
All right. Did you keep a personal diary?
Now you know that's illegal.
Oh, is it? Oh.
I don't know. I don't think so.
You don't think so? All right. Let's see. Do you recall the day your service ended?
Oh yeah.
Do you?
I'll tell you very vividly. When I first we were on that LSM when we were coming back from Japan, went into town of Wakayama, and we were coming back to the Saipan, and our ship received a message and I took it, and the message in essence says that anybody with number of points, and they're getting by various ways, had a number of points that it could be, and he could be relieved of his station because people were there to take his place, could be transferred ashore for return to the United States. You got to realize there's a 20-year-old guy, and he wasn't married, didn't have any family, to worry about, free and the whole bit. I had enough points, So you got one for each month of sea duty, and you got 2 or 3 for each battle star and all this. Well, I took that message down, I knocked on the captain's door, and I said, "Captain, can I come in?" He said, "Sure." I handed him that message, and I said, "I request immediate return for discharge." Well, he said, "No, listen, November." He said, "No, why do you want to go home? Why don't you want to stay on the next summer?" I said, "Captain, I believe I can make it back to my school before the 2nd semester starts. And if I do, I can get my diploma in May." He said, he said, "You get your bags loaded." And I loaded them so fast I didn't even get to say goodbye to the guys in my unit. And I went back to shore at Saipan. A day before Thanksgiving. What happens? They close that office, personnel office, until after Thanksgiving. Then I was put on another smaller, slower ship, and I went into Pearl. And I waited to get aboard the USS Saratoga, which was well, the carriers in those days. Went back to San Francisco. What happened? Christmas. So I had to wait for another day or so extra, see, to get on this little train and go to St. Louis. I go back to St. Louis. What happened? New Year's Eve. So that was my hard part about getting discharged. I was discharged the first unit to be discharged from St. Louis in 1946. Yeah.
Okay.
And they had the nerve to ask me if I wanted to re-enlist.
Oh.
I said, I don't want any more spam.
Yeah. Let's see. What did you do in the days and weeks after you got out of the service?
Well, like I mentioned, I went back to high school. Now here I am, 20 years old, and the 3 subjects that the state of Kansas had said you had to have before you got your diploma was 3 freshman courses. So here a 20-year-old goes into class with some 14 years old. But you know what? I made it all right.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Let's see. Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
Yes. After I left, got out of high school, I went over to Kansas State. I was there for 2 years. And being in communications, one of my friends was going down to a railroad communication school in Kansas City. And I just decided I want to go with him down there. GI Bill, yes, paid for all that. And then when I was in Kansas City, that school was only about 16 months long. And of course, all I had to do was mentally go from Blinker over the railroad telegraphy. You know,
yeah.
The code was about the same. The sound was different on the railroad telegraph key.
Oh, really?
But it just didn't take that long to transfer my thoughts.
Right. Let's see. All right. Did you make any close friendships while in the service? Do you still have today?
Oh yeah, like I mentioned on the shoot, there's a lot of LSM. There's just a lot of gentlemen in Kansas City that I see quite often, and we call each other to find out how everybody's getting along.
Yeah.
2 in Tucson, 1 in California, a couple in Indiana. Yes, very close.
Nice.
Very close.
Okay. Let's see. Did you ever join a veterans organization?
I belong to the VFW in Topeka now. I did I started out in Overland Park, VFW, McPherson, and American Legion. And after 5 or 6 years, I dropped out of the American Legion. But anyway, I joined a VFW unit in Athens, Michigan. And I had a friend who lived in Athens, and I go back to see him in the summertime. And gee, those guys treat you like a lost brother. So I thought, I just joined them. So anyway, I was in there about 5 years, then transferred over to our Topeka. So I'm going to VFW Topeka.
Okay. Let's see. What did you do as a career after the war?
Well, after I got out of school, I was a telegrapher for the Rock Island Railroad, agent telegrapher times. Then I went to work a year as a policeman. I wanted to find out the attitude of people, what made people do things. Well, I'll tell you, in that first year, you sure find out. But then I went to work in the sales department of a co-op refinery in McPherson. My job there was loading railroad cars in Omaha by the not telegraph, but like a typewriter machine. And then loading tank trucks on the dock at McPherson. Then I come to Walmigo and I worked for Balderson Construction Company as a salesman. Well, first I was with a company out at McPherson, Squirt Goof Company, and I sold products to the various dealers, Caterpillar and International. And I met some of the Balderson people and I come to work for them. Went to work as a salesman for Martin Tractor Company for about 6 months. Then I had a job with Walmigo Hospital. And I was there in the office for a couple of years, and the administrator taught me how to take x-rays. And she retired, and I was promoted to administrator of Walmigo Hospital. Basically, I worked at the hospital from 1970 and administrator from 72 to 81, but I stayed on until 1983. So I was up there for that.
Wow. Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Sure.
Did it?
Yes.
In what ways?
Well, be that it may, and I know a lot of people will be against my thoughts now, but you know, when you're living under a flag of freedom, you've got to protect that freedom. I just don't care. And just like today, all these people are trying to get at us and do things, various things, blow up our bridges and whatever. You've got to keep them out of here. And yes, I'll tell you, no, I don't want any war.
Sure.
But I want us to protect our freedom. So
Right.
what are you going to do?
Yeah. What kind of activities does your veterans organization have, or what do you do?
They have some good, I have not attended any. You better believe they've got some very good activities. They take care of the veterans in the VA hospital in Topeka, giving them parties and giving them rides, giving them needs. And they take care of us guys that need help too by keeping the authorities, meeting the congressmen, senators, you know.
Sure.
Aware that we still, some of us guys still need help.
Right.
And they have little socials there to be up to knitting, they have everything else. It's good.
Yeah. Okay. You said you attended some reunions?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
What, is it every year then? Or
Yeah, I attend the LCT reunions and the LSM reunions every year. And I'll say this, 2 years ago, we had the reunion in Omaha. Now, there is an LSM in Omaha now at Freedom Park. And there's an LST in New Orleans area. But that LSM was the very first Navy amphibious forces ship put on display.
Wow.
Now you can go all over the country and see destroyers and battleships and whatever, submarines.
Yeah.
That's the very first. This in Omaha, Freedom Park.
That's neat. How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, it made me realize that you have to grow with life. You're going to have problems. You're going to withstand those problems and not create the same thing later. And when you have a family, you're going to be proud that you did something that those kids realize that you love them and you're helping them grow. And that's what you're...
Driven by a native sailor, and those sailors, I can't recall whether they had a hat on or not, but they wore sashes, and they were white, and they had so many stripes around the bottom of them, that was their rank. And if I remember, I think they didn't have, I don't think they wore shirts. Anyway, came down and this came this car, and it happened to be a 1942 Mercury is what it was, and that was the, whoever the high official on the island was, he had sent his car down to pick the captain up off the ship and to stay at his quarters and be entertained that night. And there's a native band there, and they tried to play American music, but it was just a little bit,
It's not right.
off key. But these people didn't wear shoes,
Oh.
and they had real light feet, and I could see them keeping time with their feet, and I thought it was really different anyway. Anyway, we pulled out the next morning and headed for San Diego. In the process there, a native boy who was a dark-skinned boy, I don't know what nationality, I mean, I would just call him a native there.
Yeah.
Got on board, and he wanted to come to the United States, and so the people in the that were on our, we call it the Cooks Division, the people who did all the cooking, and they hid him for quite a long time, but just before we got to San Diego, he was discovered one morning.
Oh.
Every morning we had, at 8 o'clock, we had to go up on top, up on the deck, and it was called muster, and you had to account for yourself.
Oh.
And so anyway, somebody went through the quarters down there where they were hiding, and he wasn't in hiding at that time, so they picked him up. Anyway, he got up to, we got to San Diego, and before the gangplank was put down on the ship, the immigration people were out there to pick him up.
Oh.
The boy was probably about 16 years old,
Right.
and I'm sure it was a very traumatic experience for him.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he was shipped back right away with the first boat.
Yeah.
First ship was going back.
One boat then another.
And then after that, let's see, we're talking about 13 months.
Right.
Okay, after that, we went up to Long Beach, and then, no, we went to Long Beach, and then from there, we went back to, we went out to, dumped off all the people in San Diego. And I don't, maybe some of them up at Long Beach, I can't remember, and I don't know why we went to Long Beach, but we did. Anyway, then we went to Kwajalein, which is just a little island out in the Pacific. And it's real narrow. Picked up some Japanese prisoners, and 18 of them, and they brought them out in a landing craft, which is brought them out from the shore to the ship because there was no place for the ship to come into the harbor. Made me very uneasy. Seeing these Japanese people, very short, dressed in shorts. They were officers, what they were, and hardly anybody guarding them.
Really?
And here we had been at war with these people for quite some time, and the war hadn't been over more than maybe 10 weeks.
Right.
And anyway, we took them over to, picked them up there, took them up to Guam. And we got to go ashore at Guam for 2 hours one afternoon. And I think they served us some hot beer. And then we went down to Hawaii. And I got off, I was able to get off the shore. I had some shore leave, or liberty, they call it liberty. And, but didn't have any money. I think I had $5 in my pocket. And I didn't want to get too far from the ship with only $5 in my pocket when I didn't know where I was going. And I was only 18 years old.
Right.
And so I did go into I think it was Honolulu, but I'm not sure. And then our liberty was up at a certain time, got back on the ship, and then we went into San Francisco. And I think we had some people on board at that time, but I don't remember. Then we went down through the Panama Canal, and that was quite an experience. We stopped on the west side of the Panama Canal, and then also on the east side. But the west end of the Panama Canal, as I recall, was further east than the west side of the Panama Canal was. I mean, the west side of the Panama Canal was further east than the east side of the canal. In other words, it was an angle. I always thought you went straight through, but you didn't. It's quite interesting to watch that ship go into the locks and raise it up, and the little, I think they call them mules, which were little train-like things that ran on cogwheels, as I recall, pulled the ship through.
Do you remember how long it took to get through the canal?
Well, it was less than a day.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was off the ship either on the west coast or either at the west end of the canal or the east end, but I think it was I don't remember which it was. Not very much time. Still, I'm here looking at a kid that's still wet behind the ears, so to speak.
Not much older than us.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did some trial runs that just, what we're doing, we're taking this ship to St. Louis, the CL-49, back to Philadelphia to be decommissioned.
Oh.
And so somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean, they did some speed tests with it and so on and so forth, just to see what kind of condition it was.
Right.
I remember we were going pretty fast. And I say pretty fast. It was shaking really bad.
Oh.
It had 4 propellers that propelled it. And so, anyway, got into Philadelphia, and then we decommissioned it. I might tell you, this is not very exciting to some people who are actually fighting the war in France and in the South Pacific that you're going to be talking to or have talked to. But my job was I made water.
You made water. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, everything out there is salt water.
Oh.
The ocean is salt water.
Right.
So we had to distill that water. And they used distilled water in the boilers.
Right.
And if you didn't have pure water, they would lime up. And then you become disabled out in the middle of the ocean.
Right.
And that couldn't happen.
That makes sense.
And so that's what I did all that time. And it was called the A Division. And like I said before, you were on 4-hour watch. And so once you're, and all I did was make, they were actually boilers, what they were, and they boiled the water, and you dump probably 100 gallons at a time
Right.
into the ship's, big ship's reservoirs.
Oh, okay.
And it was a criminal offense if you dumped salt water
Really? They counted
into the fresh
as
water.
a
It
criminal
was.
offense.
And one morning, they called them feed bottoms. And one morning, the feed bottoms tested salty. And it apparently was an erroneous testing. But it was actually a criminal offense. I mean, you could be court-martialed.
Dang, that would be bad to go to prison because you dumped some salt water in.
Well, that's exactly what it was. Anyway, but the ship's complement was probably 1,200 people. At that time, it took that many to run it. And that was my job. Had good people to work with.
So you enjoyed it. That's
Well, it was enjoyable. We were a small group of people. We were trained to do what we had to do on the board ship. Spent a lot of time in Philadelphia. Well, we got in there in, it was before Christmas. And been so I, or was it just, yeah, it was before Christmas. And at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyards, we decommissioned the St. Louis. Then I was on the Wichita, which was a heavy cruiser, and then on the let's see, the other ship was the San Francisco, I believe, which was an older ship. That ship had rats on it. You don't think that's a problem, because when you get into a foreign port, you pick up the rats from those places, and they have, when they tie them up with ropes that are about maybe probably 8 inches in diameter, and those, of course, those rats would come out at night or any time, and they would put up rat shields on there, which are big tin things, so they couldn't get around it. But that's really a bad situation.
That would not be pleasant. Ugh. Oh my God.
Anyway, then I was discharged in August of 1946. Went by train to Norman, Norman, Oklahoma, is where I was discharged.
Oh.
Came back and was around Manhattan for a couple of weeks or so, and started at Kansas State.
Ah. Well, that's neat. How did you like write letters on the ship to your family back in Manhattan?
Mm-hmm.
Did it take a while for them to get there?
Yeah, it would. The ship, the letters would, every time we came into port, they would, of course, pick up the mail, and we would get mail at that time.
Yeah.
There's no other way at that time to get the
Letters and
the
stuff.
letters out there. They couldn't drop them by airplane. So, we, nothing very exciting. Understand, I went probably halfway around the world in 13 months, and that's further than some people got in 4 years in the Army, Navy, or Marine Corps.
Yep.
And so I guess from that standpoint, I was fortunate.
Yeah, that's really neat. I'm interested that you were on a boat in the water out in the middle of
Don't
nowhere.
call it a boat, it's a ship.
A ship. That I just don't know what I would do because there's no land. You can't see any land.
Oh no, you can't see land, but understand, we were caught in a typhoon over there one time.
Really?
It was a typhoon, and I can't tell you where we were at the time, but I think it was probably on the way to Kwajalein, maybe. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Kwajalein. I think I told you right. We went on the first trip out, we went from Hawaii to Guadalcanal, which is way over, not far from Australia.
Right, that's in the...
And then at Kwajalein, and during the ocean rolls, and at some time you were up on deck, and in those, they call them swells, and you'd actually be below the level of the water. If you were standing on the ship, you would be below the level of the water.
That would be
And
neat
the ship
to see.
would rise, and sometimes the bow would come way up, and if you were in real bad water and you were underway, sometimes the propellers would come out of the water, and then when they come back down, they'd race when they got out of the water, and then they'd come down. Just like spinning your wheels.
Oh. Just in the water.
Anyway, but during this typhoon, you understand, you're out there.
Right.
And the captain has to maneuver the ship so that it doesn't capsize.
Right.
Well, one night, we took what we call a 38-degree list. That's when you tilt.
Uh-huh.
And by all engineering figures, that ship should have turned on over.
Oh, wow.
But it didn't.
Goodness.
It might have been because of the amount of water we had in the feed volumes, or it might have been the amount of fuel oil we had on board. And the fact that I don't think we carried much ammunition at that time.
Mhm.
Anyway, I don't know. This had, this ship had, it must have had probably 8 gun turrets on it, and I think probably had what they call 6-inch guns. I don't recall. There might have been some 8-inch guns on it. A light cruiser, of course, is not as big as a heavy, what we call a heavy cruiser.
Right.
And I never did hear them. I never did hear them.
Oh.
Are you about ready to run
Is
out
it
of time?
tape?
Yeah, it says 0 minutes.
Okay.
I think
Well,
it's
we
around-
probably should switch over to a different tape and then.
And you just see water wherever you were.
Uh-huh.
Well, the water is never the same. It's not the same at night. It's not the same as the day. Sometimes if you'd have these big swells, and of course it was influenced by the winds, I guess. And we were out there all by ourselves, and every once in a while you'd see a school of porpoises out there swimming alongside the ship.
Oh, that'd be neat.
And they would just dive up and down, and usually when you were close to land is when you got mostly to those people, or those people just close. And they were interested. They're big fish. You've seen pictures of them.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of times that I used to have what they call the 8 to 12 watch, and you always got rid of all the trash that you accumulated on your watch that was there to be thrown out. So you would, at night, well, we slept down the 4th deck,
Mhm.
okay, and every night they would secure the hatches, and the hatches, the stairways are very, very steep on ship, very steep. In fact, anyway, at night they would button them down. So they'd be watertight in case something happened. The ship wouldn't fill itself full of water as fast anyhow. And then as you went from each deck level, you had a hatch there, and it was about that big around, which would be about 18 inches or 24 inches.
Yeah.
Well, 18 inches or 20 inches. And you had to go up the ladder, turn that little wheel, push it up, put your stuff through, and climb up yourself, and then close it. And you did that. Now, we were down on the 4th deck, understand?
Right,
Where
so
my,
you had to-
which was at the water line on the ship, you know. And we were probably 75% or more from the bow back to the stern. And they had what they call bumpers out there, which is when you pulled in the dock, these metal structures out there would hit the dock before you, well, bumpers, what do you want to call them? Anyway, you could sometimes hear the water when the water was rough outside and the ship was rolling and twisting.
Right.
You could hear the water hit that when we were in our quarters. And no air conditioning, I understand, and very little air, and it got, in the South Pacific when it got pretty hot, it
Yeah.
was very unbearable.
Yeah. Pretty.
And sometimes out there, you would sweat so much that you would make your thin mattress wet all the way through.
Soaking wet.
And of course, the odor was not really all that good. It certainly wasn't Chanel number 5. Anyway, so I think the evaporators, which we call them, that I ran, were probably on level maybe 2 or 3.
Okay.
And we would have to go up there anyway. I was up taking the trash out one night, and usually there was 2 people on duty
Right.
at one time there, and occasionally we could, one man could run both of them, and you were down there all by yourself. There was nobody around. You did have communications to the deck,
Right.
but that was all. It was just kind of a little telephone that went up to the captain's, well, I forget what they called it anyway. Where everything, all the stuff was done up on topside regarding the operation of the ship.
Right. Well, how did you do? I'm just curious. What did you do by yourself? Did you?
Oh, we were busy.
Oh, so it wasn't just
Yeah.
a sit around.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I must tell you this, we had to keep that place clean, and it wasn't very big. And you're used to going through little alleyways about 24 inches wide.
Yeah.
And I can remember there was evaporator on my right and evaporator on my left, and in the middle we had our places where we logged everything in.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that we had to put diesel fuel on these plates to keep them, and we were on metal.
Mm-hmm.
And then underneath those metal, what they call bilges, and that was where if you had any spillage of water, that water would slop around underneath there. Well, anyway, and it would eventually drain out. But during this typhoon we were through, you actually slid from one side to the other.
Right.
You'd stand there, and the ship would roll, and you just slide.
Slide.
And you lost your balance, you grabbed a hold of something. Well, anyway, when I went up to take that trash out one night, it was very calm sea.
Mm-hmm.
And at night, when the moon's out, those propellers churn the water up, and there's some phosphorus in there, and you can just see a white stream
Mm-hmm.
for miles behind you, just one big white stream. And there was about a space that was probably 30 inches back there where the lifeline met what was a crane, which we used to have airplanes on that ship, but there weren't any on there when I was there. And I was getting ready to throw the trash out, and all at once the ship lurched. Nobody,
Just.
and I liked it went overboard.
Oh my.
And next morning they would have been one short, one sailor. Honest to God, I was really, really scared because I just at the very last moment reached out and grabbed something to catch on to.
Barely.
And
Wow.
so, but anyway, people who've been used to having other guys shoot at them, this was a very calm situation. But as far as I was
Wow.
concerned, I was up there all by myself. There was nobody around. I couldn't.
You couldn't have
I
yelled
could-
for help.
I
and
could
anyone
holler
heard.
at the top of my lungs, and nobody would have heard me.
Wow.
And then another night I was up there, and I can remember the sea was just like glass, and the moon was out there, and from the moon all across the sea, it just a beam on top of the water right up to you.
Oh,
You talk about a romantic setting. Anyway, it was beautiful as far as I was concerned. Anyway, those are some of the things that I saw. I want to tell you about it being the shellback to polywog to the shellback initiation, and I've still got my card at home, and it's you're a polywog, and that's when you have not been across the equator.
Right.
You can be in the Navy and never across the equator. There's
Yeah,
a lot of them.
Circle.
Well, and because you don't go from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere.
Right.
Well, anyway, this is a whole week of understand those ships don't move very fast when they're not in a big hurry out there, and it took you, well, I think it took 10 days to go to Hawaii, if I remember right, and I think it's 5,000 miles. And so you're under steam power, and they have boilers that heat the water, and the steam then turns the turbines, and that's what turns we call them screws, they're propellers that propel the ship. And nobody else around, we were out there all by ourselves. And so they have various things out there. It had activities during the afternoons, and like I say, I missed out on all of that because I was down below working.
Mm-hmm.
But on that Saturday morning of the initiation, everybody was up on, we call it topside, which is up on the deck. We had a t-shirt on and a pair of shorts and a pair of socks. That was it. And in the Navy, you wore boxer shorts.
Right.
Okay, and so you were down on your elbows and knees, and your head was down touching the deck. And if they caught you raising your head up, looking around, they would shoot you with water that was connected to a fire hose. The fire hose was connected to water coming directly out of the sea. So it was salty water, and you get a lot of that on you, and you felt that scummy salt on you. Well, those fire hoses were pretty strong,
Right.
and you get shot with one of those. I had a friend of mine that was out there in the afternoon during the week, and for some reason or other, he got his fire hose washed his feet out from underneath him, and he went to the lifeline. That's what we call the lifeline. That's the line around the ship, this little fence.
Right.
He went through it, and somebody grabbed him by his pants leg, his dungaree pants. That's all kept him from going overboard.
And they're so tall, the fall.
Huh?
Is it a tall ship to where the fall
Oh,
would?
it would probably, I don't know how many feet, quite a ways.
Yeah,
Quite a ways to the water, but that's not the part of it.
Yeah, well, no.
There wasn't anybody to pick you up.
Yeah,
The ship would have to stop,
yeah, it would
and
kind of.
we had boats out on the ship. They would have to man the boat, go out and
Go
get you
down.
and find you. And through the rolling water,
It's a little
you
difficult.
might not, well, anyway.
It's pretty dangerous.
Anyway, this is what happened here. Well, anyway, we went through the whole line, and you had to crawl on your hands and knees all the way up over where the gun turrets were, and went before the royal king, who was a sailor dressed up like a King Neptune, and he had a man dressed up like a lady there, and I can't really recall what they called her. Anyway, they would we had they slapped some pills in your mouth. You had to take a pill when you went through sick bay, and they tasted terrible. Oh man! And then they had a thing. The devil was there, and he had a three-pronged pitchfork, and it was electrified. And if you didn't do things just right, he would touch it, and it would give you a shock. Well, luckily, before I got to that thing, the battery went dead, which I was real happy for. But then we went back, and we had to go to the royal haircut, and they would smear axle grease in your hair. And whatever was sticking up is what they took horse shears and just went across the top. So part of your hair was out that long, and part of it was about that long, or could be that long. And axle grease was kind of hard to wash out when you didn't have very much hot water, and but anyway, we got it clean. Then they had a tank back there, which was about probably 8 feet square and probably 6 feet deep, and made out of canvas. And they had a dunking deal where you sat up there, and then they dumped you over backwards, and there's 2 guys down in that thing. Well, the thing was scudgy with hair that from this, having the guys before you mended the haircut, or to the barber, the ship's barber, and they held you under. And then they let you up and they said, "What are you?" "Shellback or pollywog?" And of course, I didn't know the initiation would have been over right there.
Right.
So I said, "Well, I'm a pollywog." So I went down, and about the 3rd time, I had no strength left. And they realized that, I guess, and anyway, I had wrenched my back, and it hurt like sin, and so they let me out, and I got out. Then we had to go through what they call the slop chute. I understand now that this was shortly after Thanksgiving, and we had all that garbage there, and the chute was probably about, it's a metal, not a metal, but a canvas chute, which was about 2 feet in diameter, filled with garbage, and you had to crawl through that. And they were going to just leave the inside. Back in those days, when you got turkeys, they had everything.
Oh, yeah.
All they did was take off the feathers.
Yep.
And but the ship's doctor wouldn't let them do that because it was very unsanitary.
Yeah.
Very unsanitary.
Okay.
But it still was pretty cruddy. Then we got through that while they washed us off, and the initiation was over.
Ah, thank goodness.
Let me tell you, I kept that. There wasn't anything. There was no treatment that you could get for a wrenched back, and I kept that wrenched back from oh, 1953, I guess it was. I
Oh my God.
would have trouble every once in a while. All the time when I went to college, I would have to brace when I went to the show, I had to brace my knee against the seat in front of me in order to stay sat down for a couple hours. Anyway, no big deal where that goes. But
Should find them.
it's one of the things that I finally got over it, and well, I got some relief. I went to a chiropractor. I wouldn't let a chiropractor touch me until the secretary where I worked at that time said, "Go on." He said, "He won't hurt you." I said, "I go to him."
I'd like to go.
Anyway, we went on the East Coast, Philadelphia, and when you went on Liberty, that's when you went on, leave.
Mhm.
You can move forward if you want to do it.
Oh,
you
the
know,
light.
Anyway, I was 18 years old, and they kept pretty close track of your age out there,
Right.
just like they still do today. But when we got back to the East Coast, we were accepted totally different.
Really?
Shoot, they didn't care how old you were. We went down to Washington, D.C., and of course we always travel by train. We would go get leave, and we would go over to Camden, New Jersey, and just a place to be. Sleeping off the ship was something. That was a luxury. And I always remember that the Salvation Army had a kind of a mission over there, and they would great big gymnasium, and they would always take care of all the service people for nothing.
Right.
They'd stay there for nothing. And and we didn't have much money.
Right.
$35, $45 a month.
Did you send the lot back home, or did you keep it?
I tell you, we didn't.
I know.
We were broke all the time. And so our job was to decommission the ships. And I swear to God, that ship should never have moved again in the water after we got through with it. But I understand it did, I think it went to some South American country after we got through with it, but years later.
Huh.
It could have been scrapped later too, I don't know, but anyway, it was put in mothballs, and you've seen pictures of those ships being tied up
Right.
in harbors at various places. All in all, I'm sitting here talking to you, but I can think about the guys the guys that were on that ship that went through the war.
Mm-hmm.
And a kamikaze plane had hit that ship.
Mm-hmm.
He hit the hangar deck. We had two seaplanes that they had on that aircraft, and they would I think they had a catapult there. They would catapult them off the ship, but then the seaplanes would come up, and then would be picked up by a crane.
Oh.
And picked them up, and then we'd go back to that hangar back there. But the ship was all over the Pacific during World War II, and outside that one direct hit with a kamikaze, Japanese kamikaze aircraft, was never torpedoed. And of course, in convoys out there, they go together and they would zigzag in the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
so that
Be
make
harder
them
to
harder to hit and prior to October of 1945, I have no idea where all that ship had been, but it had been a lot of places.
Yeah, you've seen quite a bit.
Anyway, but I had a good experience. My mother would not let me join the Navy, and rightfully so, because my friends in my senior class, several of them joined the Navy, and they did that in about April, but they didn't graduate. See,
Right.
so then they had to go back and finish that all out
Before.
after you got back, and I got mine taken care of beforehand.
That way you just came home.
I came home and started at Kansas State, and of course, I don't know whether you've heard anybody talk about the GI Bill or not.
No, I don't know.
Well, they passed legislation in 1945, or maybe, I think it probably, well, it would have been 1945 because the war was over. Men who had served in the military could get so much a month, and their tuition was to be paid.
Oh.
And so that's how I went to college. Otherwise, I would not have gone to college. My parents would not have gone.
Started your insurance agency?
No, I did several things before that.
Oh.
Anyway, I didn't get out of college till 1952. I had an unfortunate circumstance. I had to be out for medical reasons, and I had to interrupt my college tour, so to speak. And that was a great help to me. Of course, my parents lived in Manhattan. I was able to live at home, and my tuition was paid. And I did work summer myself, and I always worked every summer. And I was grateful for that because, I did go to Kansas State. I graduated from Kansas State, got a Bachelor of Science degree in business. Not accounting, but the business side of it. And here I am.
Well, this was...
I will have, if I make it through September, to September this year, I will have been in the insurance business 50 years.
Wow.
And that's sometimes just 1 year's experience 50 times.
Yeah.
Not really, but
Oh, well.
I guess I've liked what I've been doing. I was an adjuster for 10 years and then moved here in 1963 in September or August.
Yeah.
And been here ever since.
Well, my parents sure like you.
Huh?
My parents like you.
Okay,
You're who we use, so.
sure. No, that's great. No, I enjoy what I do. I don't have a schedule I have to follow. I'm my own boss, except you're never your own boss. You always got somebody else telling you what to do.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Well, even the
Now,
president.
you got questions that I've been rambling on here for a long time.
No, it's so funny
And
because...
so what specific questions did you want to ask me?
It's so funny because you answer some of them as you just talk. I do, just as a personal question, I want to know, what, did entertainers ever come to the ship, or how'd you entertain yourself?
Well, we had movies.
Oh, you had movies.
We had movies, and we had, we had what we call a canteen, where you went to buy soap and underwear and toothbrushes and razor blades and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they call it a canteen, or in some cases it was called small stores.
Yeah.
We would have once in a while we would have movies.
That would be,
I can't tell you what, but again, the movies were always in the evening, and if you had the 8 to 12 watch, you didn't
You'd
get
have
to
to
watch
miss
the movie.
them. That's, well, but you had the 12 to 4, so.
Well, I had to, you shifted.
Oh.
Sometimes you had the 12 to 4 in the morning, and then you had the 4 to 8 in the morning. And so interrupts your sleep once in a while.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Let's see. Have you kept in touch with anybody from your
No, well, yes. See, that's been quite a little while ago.
ship? That'd be tough.
55, 58 years, 57 years. Not really. Yes, I have. You go into a company and you're quartered in barracks. I can remember my company number. It was 256. I don't have any idea what that meant, but my company was 256 at San Diego boot camp.
Right.
When I went to sick bay with my strep throat, I lost out. I had to take the next, they assigned me to another company.
Oh, okay.
And understand that, I was only maybe out of sick bay. Oh, maybe a week, over 2 weeks, I don't think.
Right.
And I've been reassigned to a new company, and then you went on, your boot leave it's called.
Right.
So, as always, when you get things disrupted by all your paperwork, they'll never catch up with you.
Yeah, right.
My ticket was paid to ride the train from San Diego to Manhattan, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that you own goes in your sea bag. And it's about that big around and about that tall. That includes your mattress.
Really?
So you roll all your clothes, you learn how to do this. You roll all your clothes and you tie them with a little, I forget what they call that little string you use. But anyway, everything you had was in that sea bag.
That is amazing.
Your name stamped on it, and it's placed together, and every sailor owned a padlock.
And they,
And so you padlocked it and kept the key in your pocket. Even your dress clothes would be, and surprisingly, if you knew how to do it, and you can roll clothes so tight that it's just about like a ball bat. And anyway, my train ticket was paid.
right.
I hadn't been paid yet,
Yeah.
and I had $5 in my pocket. And I had a little delay in getting my ticket, and the train was pulling out of the station. I had to run to catch it.
Oh.
And I came home with $5 in my pocket from San Diego to Manhattan, Kansas on the train,
Oh.
and I had a little money left over. A lot of, I think maybe peanut butter sandwiches. They might have been bread and butter, I'm not sure. But anyway, it took about 2 days and a half to come. And of course, you never got off we went out through Salt Lake City and through Wyoming down to Denver and back on the Union Pacific. But anyway, I always marvel that I tell people that I came back from California one time with $5 in my pocket.
That's a feat.
And I was wondering how I got. I knew I wasn't going to starve because I knew I would get something to eat someday.
Oh yeah, there's always.
But anyway, people would come through the train, sell you sandwiches. Sometimes the train would stop and you get off and you go in and you had a lunch counter. And understand, I had to economize considerably, but that's what I did.
Oh, I don't know if I could do it. I'd get too
And
hungry.
I also had $5 in my pocket when I went into Honolulu.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get over the number of Cadillacs I saw in Honolulu in 1945.
Really?
And what bothered me is that the people over there were all Oriental looking. And having lived in Manhattan, Kansas,
Yeah.
you didn't see anything like that.
You still don't. Yeah.
True. True. Okay. What else did you have?
Well, that
I've talked and talked and talked and talked.
that.
Oh, you asked me about my my friends. I got this new company I was assigned to, and I don't remember the name of it. The fellow was from Havensville, Kansas,
Oh.
and he lives in Iowa now. And every once in a while, when he comes, he has some ties. His wife came from Westmoreland, and he has some ties to this country. Every time he comes back, he usually goes and comes to see me. But he's retired now. I'm not retired, and I should be. Anyway, see him. He's really the only fellow that I got acquainted with because I lost track
Yeah.
of the people. I did come back from the Ozarks one time and stopped in Garnett, Kansas, and looked up an old friend of mine. But anyway, not really did I keep close.
Right.
Because they were from all other places. I went
You
to
were-
Kansas State and so, not much correspondence.
Right, well, that's okay though.
I'm sure that there's been reunions from the USS St. Louis that have been conducted, but I've never been to one. I didn't. Yes, that was my ship, but it didn't carry me through the hard times of war.
Right.
Those are pleasure times, probably. But I never had to fire a shot except on the firing range.
Well, no, you covered pretty much everything. Is there anything you want to say that you haven't, I mean, you want to add?
Well, it was quite an experience to be part of the military. But, you know, I would have been drafted
Right.
at some time. And heaven knows, my dad was in World War I, and he was in France. And there was a joke at that time that in the Navy you never got in mud that was up to your knees.
That's good. Yeah, my dad, he was a Marine, and
He's a Marine?
he was always on ships and stuff. So.
Well, he would have been. And